Okay, fine. So today's topic is the Azilsartan calcium channel blocker, a new frontier in hypertension management as a first line antihypertensive management. We know that the burden of hypertension is quite big and it is as high as 40% in industrialized population. Unfortunately, its prevalence is increasing day by day, and along with that, it is a high risk for so many other conditions, including the cardiovascular disorders. It is invariably associated with additional risk factors such as dyslipidemia, diabetes, and comorbid conditions including CKD, the stroke, and it amounts to almost 80 to 90%. The mortality is quite high, almost a crore per year due to hypertension. This accounts for more than 10% of total mortality, which is usually due to a stroke, coronary heart disease, or end stage renal disease. Unfortunately, in newly diagnosed, only 15 to 20% of patients achieve the normotensive status either due to treatment or even without treatment. In either of the situations, whether they receive treatment or they do not receive treatment, only 15 to 20% are going to be normotensive. This is something which is very alarming. First thing is that when we talk of hypertension, almost 50% of cases are undiagnosed. Of those diagnosed, 50% receive treatment. Of the 50% who are receiving, only 50% of the patients are able to achieve the normotensive state. That amounts to only 15 to 20% of the total diagnosed patient of hypertension. So it is, as a clinician, we need to understand that it is not only important to regular follow up so that we are able to manipulate the drugs, we are able to adjust the doses of the drugs or put on sufficient medicine so as to achieve the normotensive state, then only we will be able to prevent the cardiovascular complications which occur due to uncontrolled hypertension. The ISH guidelines suggest what are the ideal characteristics of an antihypertensive. First of all, it should be evidence-based in terms of laboratory diagnosis, laboratory measurements. It should give us morbidity and mortality benefit. Preferably, it should be once a day regimen so that the patient can have more compatibility, more better compliance for the treatment of hypertension. It should be affordable, it should be well tolerated by the patient, and along with the laboratory evidence, it should also have population-based evidence so that we are confident in using a particular drug in the treatment of hypertension. For that matter, this holds true for any medicine which may be due to hypertension, diabetes, or simple antibiotic, whatever it may be, it must be, these characteristics would stand true for any medicine that we are using.
Sorry to interrupt you,
So,
sir. Slides are not.
yeah, tell me.
Slides are not
Slides are
moving.
not moving.
Yes, sir, it is
Okay, I will
first slide.
just try to reshare the stop sharing and then again share the slide.
Yes.
Is it visible?
Yes, sir, it is coming, sir. Now this is the only first slide which we can see.
Now, are you seeing the changing of slides?
No, sir, it is not happening, sir. I think, sir,
Not happening.
above, sir, enable editing. Yes, now it is fine. Now it is moving.
Is it changing?
Yes, sir, now it is changing, sir.
I guess then in that situation, we will have to go without full screen. Okay.
Okay, sir.
I guess that's not the issue.
No,
Message will be conveyed.
it is visible, sir.
Visible now. Okay, fine. So we shall continue.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, fine. So how do we classify hypertension? Here we see four classification: high normal blood pressure, grade 1, 2, and 3. That means there is something called normal blood pressure, the fifth one which is not visible on the screen. but is evident that normal blood pressure would be defined as a blood pressure of less than 130 systolic and less than 85 diastolic. So high normal BP is more than 130 but less than 140, that is 130 to 139 of systolic and 85 to 90, 89 of diastolic. Going ahead, grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3. Now grade 3 can also be called as malignant hypertension. That means it needs special attention. It's not just hypertension that we are dealing with when we are treating with grade 3 hypertension. The patient presents with certain complications such as the retinal involvement or renal involvement or cardiovascular involvement, generally in grade 3 hypertension. So we need to take care of that also when we are talking about grade 3 hypertension. So coming back to high normal blood pressure. Generally, we do not need to treat the patient at this stage. It is the lifestyle modification which is most important in high normal BP. For that matter, the lifestyle modification holds true in management of hypertension throughout, whether it is any grade. If the patient is to achieve the normal, even in high normal BP, we may need to start the treatment, specifically if the patient is prone to have coronary heart disease or cardiovascular disorders. When it comes to grade 1, grade 2 or grade 3, generally we need to start the treatment in all the three situations. The only difference would be the intensity of the drug which we are using. We need to start the treatment as early as possible at a normotensive stage. What is the normal systolic blood pressure of target less than 140 as a treatment range? But it has been observed that if we target at 130, then we are able to achieve a normotensive state along with control of the risk factors. But when we target at 140, generally we do not take care of the risk factors which are associated with hypertension. So practically speaking, our aim should be round about 130 of systolic and a diastolic of less than 85, so that we are not only taking care of the hypertension but also the complications associated with it. In elderly, we have little bit of relaxation in terms of target. If the patient is more than 65, we target of less than 140 by 90. But if the patient is less than 65, we target at less than 130 by 80. It is also important that when we start management, we should get a reduction in blood pressure of more than 20 by 20 millimeter of systolic and 10 millimeter of diastolic blood pressure within a few days of a start of treatment. So that is one important thing. There was a time that when we have raised the threshold for treatment of hypertension, but generally speaking, that does not hold very true. It is stable only for lowest risk, but unfortunately, we do not see any patient when the blood pressure is 160 by 100 and he does not have any other metabolic disorder. Is very rare to see. So practically speaking, we should have a threshold of more than 140 by 90 and a target of less than 130 by 80 to keep it simple. How to start the treatment? It's a good idea to start the treatment with low dose of more than one drugs and then add on a third drug depending on the response of the patient towards the blood pressure. The drugs which we have with ourselves in management of hypertension include ACE inhibitors, angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel blockers, diuretics. These three are the first mainstay of the treatment in hypertension, followed by potassium sparing diuretics, loop diuretics, beta blockers and central sympatholytics. Now our idea is to treat the hypertension such that we achieve the target. It has been observed and advocated by all the societies of hypertension that in Indian patients, calcium channel blocker is an important drug in management of hypertension. Now we have choice of two drugs to add on to it. One is ARB, another is diuretic. Here when we talk about diuretic, we talk about thiazide-like diuretics, that is hydrochlorothiazide and chlorthalidone. Loop diuretics are preferred in patients of valvular involvement or left ventricular failure. Spironolactone is a good choice when we are using loop diuretics and we are unable to achieve the desired result. So, in an uncomplicated hypertension, it's a good idea to start with ACE or ARB. C unable to achieve, we should add these three, and in resistant hypertension, we can go with other drugs, that is spironolactone, that is potassium sparing, or beta blocker, or central sympatholytic, or alpha blocker, depending on the requirement of the patient and age of the patient. But calcium channel blocker remains the mainstay of treatment in hypertension. What about the management of hypertension in coronary artery disease? Here there is little bit change. We start with ARB along with beta blocker and diuretic, followed by, once again, we either add CCB or other drugs which we talked just now. In chronic kidney disease, once again, a combination of ARB with calcium channel blocker and diuretic is the mainstay of treatment to start with. It's a good idea to start with low dose of more than one drug and then up titrate the doses to achieve the desired result. Now, why do we talk about this combination of drugs rather than a full dose of one particular drug? Here we see the synergistic effect of using more than one drug. When we are using calcium channel blocker, we have arteriodilation, and when we are using ARB, we have venodilation. So we have both arterio and venal dilation. Calcium channel blocker is known to cause peripheral edema, which is being attenuated by ARBs. So once again, we have synergistic effect in terms of the side effects which sometimes occur with some of the molecules. Also, I would like to point out here that the newer calcium channel blockers are known to have lesser incidence of peripheral edema in comparison to the older calcium channel blockers. Calcium channel blockers are also known to be effective in low renin patient, which is true for Indian patients, whereas ARBs are effective in high renin patients. So a balance is maintained here also. CCB is also known to cause reduction in cardiac ischemia because of the arteriodilation. Therefore, it improves the myocardial blood supply in the coronaries. Whereas ARBs have no such effect, but ARB has a benefit in terms of myocardial modification. So a combination of CCB and ARB is a wonder combination in management of hypertension, specifically more so in patients of CKD and coronary artery disease. Coming to the mechanism of action, ARB is known to cause RAS blockade, and therefore it has benefits in congestive heart failure as well as it has renal benefits. Now CCB has RAS activation method and it probably has no renal or CHF benefits directly. But I would like to point out here that the newer calcium channel blockers, which causes both afferent and efferent arterial dilation at the renal level, as well as because of its arteriodilation, and since it is not causing, the newer CCBs are not causing reflex tachycardia, which was there with the older ones, it is also benefiting the CHF patient because it does not increase the myocardial oxygen demand, which is one of the important factors. I must point out here that it is not at the cost of beta blockers. Beta blockers is a must in management of CHF along with ARBs and diuretic, but if we are unable to achieve the desired result in terms of hypertension, it's a good idea to use ARBs with the beta blockers, diuretics. A calcium channel blocker can be a fourth add-on drug in management of hypertension in patients of CHF. In this way, we understand that a combination of CCB, that is calcium channel blocker, and ARBs, specifically the new ones, not only tend to reduce the blood pressure, complementary clinical benefits in terms of myocardial and renal benefits. Now, what are the pharmacological benefits or risk associated with the ARBs, and how is irbesartan compared to other ARBs? The US FDA suggests that a drug should be able to help reducing the blood pressure. It should also have cardiovascular benefits because cardiovascular risk is directly related to the blood pressure. We all know this, and this is being endorsed by FDA also. Now, the data has suggested that irbesartan has a greater antihypertensive effect in comparison to the other molecules of the same class, and this is the reason that this molecule has created an interest among the clinicians, and more so after its approval from various societies in management of hypertension. The data suggests that when ARBs are used and compared in management of hypertension in full doses, that is irbesartan 80, Olmi 40 and Telmi 80, the blood pressure reduction is maximally seen with irbesartan when compared to olmesartan and telmisartan. The data suggests that systolic blood pressure is achieved to a level of less than 140, or more than 20 millimeters systolic blood pressure reduction is seen in almost 60% of patients taking irbesartan, whereas 50% taking olmesartan and only 30% in telmisartan group. So this is how it is shown that irbesartan scores over its other counterparts, other molecules of the same class. When compared to other molecules such as candesartan, valsartan, olmesartan, once again irbesartan 80 mg, the full dose, has shown to be more beneficial in terms of reduction of blood pressure. Not only that, it has also shown that it tends to reduce the blood pressure more efficiently in comparison with the ACE inhibitors, that is a full dose of ramipril of 10 mg. On an average, over 24 hours in patients of over more than 6,000 in 7 different randomized controlled trials have shown that irbesartan tends to reduce the blood pressure in clinic by, in diastolic terms, about 2.6 millimeter, and 24-hour average diastolic blood pressure reduces by 2 millimeters when compared to other molecules. What I mean to say is, when we compare irbesartan to other molecules, the irbesartan tends to reduce the diastolic blood pressure on an average may 2 to 3 millimeters more in comparison to the other molecules. If other molecules say reduces the blood pressure by 7 millimeters of mercury, the irbesartan will reduce this by 10 millimeters of mercury. So this is an added advantage of irbesartan over other ACE and ARBs. Another data over hemodialysis, irbesartan has shown that it tends to reduce the systolic and diastolic blood pressure by almost 20 millimeters and 10 millimeters respectively. It also tends to reduce the cardiac mortality in hemodialysis patients. Another data which shows that irbesartan, when compared to olmesartan, has a potent antihypertensive effect, as because the systolic blood pressure reduces by almost more than 20 millimeters of mercury in irbesartan group, whereas it reduces only 14 millimeters of mercury in olmesartan group. Similarly, in diastolic blood pressure, there is 12 and 9 millimeters of mercury difference in olmesartan and irbesartan group. Also, the effect is sustained for 24 hours in 95% of patients in irbesartan group, whereas only in 70% of group patients in olmesartan group. This multiple effect of this systolic, diastolic and 24-hour effect of blood pressure in irbesartan group is probably seen because of its inhibition of the angiotensin receptors, the decrease in 20-hydroxy-eicosapentaenoic tetraenoic acid, and activation of MAS receptors. All these put together is probably due to the more stronger binding of irbesartan, reduction in sodium and fluid retention, and it therefore prevents the cardiac hypertrophy and attenuates the renal damage which tends to occur. In this way, it not only causes the reduction in blood pressure to a desired level, but it also causes the cardioprotection. The original article published has also shown that azelsartan is associated with increased circulating angiotensin levels and reduced renovascular 20-hydroxyenoic tetraenoic levels. Another data has also shown that azelsartan improves stall sensitivity and helps in modulating the proximal tubular sodium exchanger in animal data. So in this way, it has multiple mechanisms of action which is not seen with other ARBs or other ARBs. So what is the place of azelsartan? We understand that this is a new angiotensin receptor blocker, but it is also shown to be superior in terms of ambulatory and clinical BP lowering effects when compared to olmesartan and valsartan. Therefore, its clinical uses are more pronounced and should be promoted in comparison to its other counterparts. It is well tolerated and the blood pressure control and response rates is much greater than the other drugs of the same class by almost 10%. So this is a useful treatment option, specifically in those patients who are unable to achieve the desired hypertension goals even on triple drug when treating for hypertension. Now, coming to the calcium channel blockers, is it only the blood pressure reduction which is important when managing hypertension? I understand we all agree that it is not only the hypertension but also the complications associated with it that needs to be taken care of. Way back 20 years back, Abernethy and Swartz very clearly said that calcium antagonists have assumed a major role in the treatment of patients with hypertension and coronary heart disease. They are none of the widely trumpeted dangers from dihydropyridine calcium channel blockers. Dihydropyridines, we understand, there are two, the diltiazem and verapamil, which were used in older ages. The Kaplan has very clearly said in all her trial that the worry which we were having in calcium channel blocker with dihydropyridine is no longer true with newer calcium channel blockers. The guidelines, maybe European or American, has very clearly suggested that CCB should be used not only in management of hypertension but also left ventricular hypertrophy, asymptomatic atherosclerosis, stroke, angina pectoris, atrial fibrillation, peripheral vascular diseases, isolated hypertension, metabolic syndrome, pregnancy, and of course in Indian patients, which we started talk with, that in Indian patients, calcium channel blocker is the mainstay of the treatment, and a combination of CCB and ARB is preferred by various guidelines including European Society of Hypertension and European Society of Cardiology. The CCB ACE inhibitor, ARB diuretic, ACE and diuretic, and CCB diuretic, all are preferred choices. So we understand that these three molecules, ARB, CCB, and diuretic, remain the mainstay of treatment in hypertension. Calcium channel blockers can be divided into two categories. One is dihydropyridines and non-dihydropyridines, which we are talking just now. The dihydropyridines include the first, second, third, and fourth generation, that is nifedipine and nicardipine, benidipine and ifenadipine, third generation amlo and azilnidipine, fourth generation cilnidipine, licarnidipine, and lecinadipine. The verapamil and diltiazem, the non-dihydropyridines, that is benzodiazepines and phenylalkylamines, are the drugs which were used previously as calcium channel blockers. Now the newer generation drugs in dihydropyridine groups have its own advantage in management of hypertension and the comorbid conditions. The European Society of Cardiology textbook of cardiovascular medicine 19 also endorsed cilnidipine in management of hypertension. The conventional calcium channel blockers are known to cause reflex tachycardia, pedal edema, and proteinuria. which are being eliminated with newer calcium channel blockers, probably because of the dual mechanism of action of inhibiting the L type and N type of calcium channel blockers. The L type of calcium channel blockers, when inhibited, it prevents the vasoconstriction, which is a normal physiological process due to the L type of calcium channels. The N type, which is acted upon by the norepinephrine, physiologically causes vasoconstriction. It increases cardiac contractility and causes tachycardia. It also causes decreased renal flow and renal secretion. Now, when these two are being blocked, the L and N, we have its beneficial effects to us. By inhibiting the L and N type of calcium channels, we get desired reduction in blood pressure. There's reduction in proteinuria because of the efferent and afferent arterial dilation at the renal level. There is decrease in pedal edema, there is improved cardiac function, and it has a pleiotropic effect in terms of reduction in uric acid levels also. So advanced generation antihypertensive have slow onset, therefore there will be smooth BP reduction. So chances of stroke, which we see with older generation of antihypertensives such as nifedipine, is not seen here. Therefore, I would like to quote here in red words the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine says that we must not use, I repeat, we must not use sublingual nifedipine for reduction of blood pressure. Why? Because it is making the patient prone to go into ischemic stroke. So it's desired that we should go for a drug which has slow onset, which will lead to a smooth reduction in blood pressure, and therefore there will not be a hypotension, the rebound hypotension, which might occur with the older antihypertensive. Also, long duration of effect, almost 24 hours, provides better control, specifically in early morning hypertension. Therefore, what we know as that the ischemia, myocardial ischemia or stroke which occurs in the early morning, probably due to the blood pressure surge in the early hours of the day, maybe around 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning, is also prevented by using this particular drug. One another thing which we should take into mind while managing hypertension, that when we are using a single pill in management of hypertension, we should use the drug in as a night dose rather than morning dose. Once daily drug gives a chance of better compliance. So a long half-life of drug gives us a chance to use the drug in a once daily dose, and patient feels happy about it, and a combination of drug tend to reduce the number of pills. It also suppresses the sympathetic overactivity, therefore there is no reflex tachycardia or hypotension. It is metabolically neutral, therefore it does not have adverse effect in management of diabetes or dyslipidemia. We also have pleiotropic effects in terms of anti-inflammatory, anti-proliferative, and antioxidant effect. That means it is indirectly giving us protection in terms of cardiovascular and renal micro and macrovascular complications of hypertension. So, a calcium channel blocker, by inhibiting the L and N types, inhibits the norepinephrine release. Therefore, it has lesser vasoconstriction, it causes lesser tachycardia, it causes lesser reduction in blood flow, therefore lesser reduction in renin secretion. It maintains the vasodilation, therefore it causes blood pressure reduction. Whereas the irbesartan, by inhibiting the angiotensin 2, has decreased vasoconstriction. It prevents the aldosterone secretion and catecholamine release. So this synergistic effects tend to have a better blood pressure lowering activity. A combination of cilnidipine to irbesartan is known to cause reduction in systolic and diastolic blood pressure significantly by almost 20 and 10 millimeters of mercury at the end of about 16 weeks, as was seen in this particular study. In systolic blood pressure, there is round about 15 to 20 millimeters of reduction, and in diastolic there is almost 10 millimeters of reduction of blood pressure. So we are able to achieve the desired goal with use of this combination in age group of more than 65 in almost 50% of patients, and in age group of less than 65 we are able to achieve this target in almost 40% of patients. On an average we are able to achieve the target blood pressure goal in almost 30 to 35% of patients. So before we conclude, we just go through the merits of the two molecules. Azilsartan, which is the eighth ARV to be approved for treatment of hypertension. It has a benefit in terms of 24-hour blood pressure lowering effect. It's more effective than Olmi and Valsartan. In combination with CCB, it is much more effective in lowering systolic blood pressure with lesser incidence of peripheral edema. A combination of thiazide type diuretic chlorthalidone helps in lowering the systolic blood pressure more efficiently and ideal in salt sensitive hypertension, that is those individuals who tend to have increase in their blood pressure due to salt intake. In that particular patient, azilsartan seems to be much beneficial. Coming to the cilnidipine, it is the fourth generation calcium channel blocker with highly vasoselective effect. It blocks L and N type of calcium channel. Therefore, it inhibits the release of norepinephrine at the sympathetic nerve endings. It stimulates the vasodilation, lesser tachycardia, lesser incidence of pedal edema. It has cardioprotective, renoprotective, and neuroprotective effect with improved insulin resistance. So I conclude my talk by saying that a combination of azilsartan and cilnidipine, the newer CCB and a newer ARB is much more beneficial in management of hypertension. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, you are most welcome.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a wonderful and insightful deliberation. I request all the delegates who have joined us, if you have any queries, you can, put your query on the chat box. I think, sir, one question has already come. I will read for you, sir.
How do we see the use of Myotin CN, that is combination of azilsartan and cilnidipine when compared to telmisartan and cilnidipine? As we talked in last few slides, that I do not say that telmisartan is a bad molecule, but I must say that azilsartan is a better molecule. Why? Because the blood pressure reduction with azilsartan is more significant in comparison to the telmisartan. So once we have newer molecule with us and we have an advantage, we must use it. We should go. समय की धारा बदलती रहती है, उसके साथ हम लोगों को चेंज होने की आवश्यकता है. कल टेलमिसार्टन में खूबी थी, हम लोग टेलमिसार्टन यूज कर रहे थे. आज हम लोगों के पास एक नया मॉलिक्यूल है azilsartan, and since we have this molecule, we should use it to give the patient maximum possible benefit. In present scenario, the patient is having so much of stress. We are seeing so many young hypertensives. We are unable to achieve the desired target. So why not use it? It is definitely a preferred choice when compared to telmi and cilnidipine combination. No second thoughts about it.
Thank you very much, sir. Once again,
any other question?
Yeah. Once again, requesting the delegates, if you have any questions, kindly raise your queries in the box. Sir, we can wait for a couple of minutes before we wind.
Sure.
Requesting all the delegates, if you have any query, you can put your queries in the chat box.
I am seeing here my senior colleague Samuel Madam. My very good evening, Madam. Of course, very good evening to all the delegates.
Sir, if you want
special regards to Samuel Madam.
To have anyone drafted into this live webinar, I can do that, sir.
Sorry, I missed you, Kunal.
Sir, I am saying, sir, if you want anyone to be drafted in this live webinar, that can be done, sir. We can allow him or her to talk to you, sir, live.
I guess we should open it if anybody wants to speak up.
I request all the delegates, if you want to speak up anything or you want to have, conversation with sir, then you can raise your hand so that I can draft you in this live webinar. Yeah. Good evening, ma'am. You
Good
can.
evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a wonderful presentation. And I have a case who's, despite all the drugs, 4 drugs, still the high blood pressure is high. And suddenly it drops down to 80, 90 by 60 and all that. So I'm finding it very difficult to handle it. And by evening it goes up again. He's already on calcium channel blocker and ARB and beta blocker. He's a post PTCA. So he's on beta blocker also, and now diuretic added. Morning it is very high. By afternoon it just drops to even 190 like that. Then again it picks up and goes to 170, 180 like that. I just don't know how to handle. And his
Ma'am,
heart rate is good. Suddenly the diastole also goes up. When it drops down, everything just drops down like that. It happens almost every other day. So how am I to
ma'am,
handle?
my suggestion would be
Yeah,
that one thing is that we should divide the doses of the medicines in two parts at least. One is he should take the morning doses by around about 8 a.m.
yeah,
and evening doses by 8 p.m.
yeah. That
Suppose
is
we
what
are
he's
using,
doing. It is
yeah, great,
8:30 and 8:30, doctor.
great, madam. So it's a good idea that suppose we are, as we said, we are using diuretic, maybe I guess hydrochlorothiazide.
Yeah,
Okay. And what are the other, and maybe suppose we are using ARBs, 80 milligrams.
he's
So
on
we can
tell.
divide it.
You won't believe, doctor. He's on amlodipine 5 milligrams twice a day.
Great,
Then
great.
telmisartan H 100 milligrams almost 80 and 20 again in the morning and
Yeah.
80 in the evening, and then plain
Mm-hmm.
80 in the evening, and beta blocker metoprolol he's on uh, 2.5, almost 2.5 and a half, twice, I mean 1.5 tablets of 2.5, because he's a asthmatic, so I'm very careful in giving beta blocker. If I reduce the beta
Yeah,
blocker, the
madam.
heart rate goes up. So I'm just doing that.
Okay, okay. So
I
what I
just
would
thought,
suggest, ma'am,
uh,
I would suggest that we should do like this. Maybe
yes,
12.5 milligram of hydrochlorothiazide in the morning,
uh,
40 milligrams of ARVs in the morning, and 40 milligrams in the evening. I am changing a little bit what you have suggested.
yeah,
5 milligrams amlodipine is there. We can go with cilnidipine because that will have lesser effect on heart rate. So
yeah,
reflex tachycardia is less. Milligrams morning and 10 milligrams evening.
yes,
Third, fourth is beta blocker. Once again, since he's asthmatic, we should use lesser quantity. And if the heart rate is increasing, we should add ivabradine to it. Suppose we are
that's
using
correct.
nebivolol,
Hmm.
suppose we are using nebivolol, so we can use 2.5 milligram twice a day, and along with that, we can add
Yeah.
2.5 milligram of nebivolol twice a day. So that will take care of his heart rate. Now, what we are seeing is that he is having fluctuations in the blood pressure. I guess
Yes.
we can add a small quantity of anxiolytic. Maybe it
He's
is
already on,
or
doctor. He's already on, and I cannot visit it because he's depending on it also.
okay, fine. So in that situation, this little bit of changes we can try, and
Yeah.
even if we are unable to get a desired result, then it's a good idea to use central sympatholytics such as moxinidine, maybe zero point 0.2 milligram in the night. That will
Okay.
help in managing his hypertension.
Okay, doctor.
And of course, I understand he must be on a statin and aspirin as he is post PTCA patient.
Yeah. He's on.
I guess that should help, madam.
Yeah, he's on rosuvastatin and clopidogrel and aspirin
Yeah,
also. Mm.
yeah. I guess that should help, madam.
Okay, doctor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you,
ma'am.
Hank, for coming
All
here.
the very best. Nice, good, very good presentation, doctor. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Unmute. You can mute.
I think there are no more questions, sir. So with your permission, we can conclude now, sir.
Thank you.
Sir,
Once
on
again,
behalf,
before
sir,
I end, I would like to thank JB Chemicals, Kunalji, Ujjwal, Santoshji for arranging this talk. Thank you all the delegates for being participating in this talk. Thank you so much.
sir, accept our thank also, sir. It was really wonderful, pleasure listening to you, sir. And we hope, sir, in future also we would get this chance listening to you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I'm sure all the delegates who have joined, they must have been benefited with your insightful deliberation and presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Have a nice day, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good night. Bye.